Great. Well, welcome. We'd like to call the October 6th, 2022 election board meeting to order. And we'll start with old business.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Okay. I'd like to start with approval of minutes of our September 1st meeting.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. The minutes that I found were in draft format. While I didn't have any additions, deletions, or corrections, because it was simply in draft format, I didn't want to speak for you or for Mr. Donovan, even if by proxy. So I would like to make a motion that we table the approval of minutes for the September 1st meeting until the November meeting, when we can approve the both the September and October minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. Can we have a roll call?
Chairperson Rana
Yes.
and Clerk Brown,
Yes.
Board Member Turner.
Yes.
Motion approved 3-0.
Thank you. So we'll move to our next item, which is late CFA 4 filings. And I believe either Clerk Brown or Karen.
So for the filings from the primary, I have finally gotten my very last one from Attorney Carl Lamb, and you all have a copy of that, a letter that explains why he was late. And we are ready. So I don't know if you want it read or you have it there in front of you, whatever you would like to do with that.
I've had an opportunity to read it.
I have as well.
I have read it as well. Is this a first offense on his part?
I don't have that paperwork with me. I think, do you want to think it's a second?
I feel as though it was the second where we would do a warning, another warning.
I think so. This has been since April and I just didn't bring all that paperwork with me this time.
You've been a little busy today.
It's a little bit a turn here, turning around the corner of election.
And so, Mr. Howe, it was not a question of the penalty. It was, we didn't have the explanation. So, unless someone has any objections, I'm happy to make a motion that we close this matter out with a warning for candidate Lamb, and move forward.
Roll call.
Okay, Chairperson Rana,
Yes.
Board Member Turner,
Yes.
and Clerk Brown.
Yes.
Motion approved 3-0. And I could just add too that the next filing deadline is October 21st. So it literally is right around the corner again.
Thank you so much for that announcement as well. So October 21st is the next filing deadline. We'll move now to new business, and we'll start with our first item, which is updates from Karen Wheeler and then Clerk Brown.
Okay, I do have a couple updates. This is National Voter Education Week from October 3rd to the 7th. If you didn't know that, or if our audience didn't know that, I think that's very interesting. And IU has done different things to promote that. And then October 12th around noon, of course, our early voting starts October 12th. I should probably just back up a little bit. October 11th is the last day you can register to vote. And you can do that online at indianavoters.com if you have an Indiana driver's license or an Indiana ID. Otherwise, you can send it in or you can come into our office. And if you haven't registered, we really would like that for it to happen. But then on the 12th, we start early voting. And that's at 302 South Walnut Street, where it used to be the Napa building, used to be the blue building. It's no longer blue. It's a very nice beige. It looks very, very nice, and it's between the convention center and the Bloomington bus transit right in the middle. We will have more signage, more flags. I think it'll be easier to find, although people did do a good job of finding it. Anyway, on October 12th at noon, we're going to have, it's what's called an early voting press conference. And that is with IU Big Ten Challenge Committee / PACE. They do a lot of things with voter registration. And they're going to have some cameras there, wanting to interview a few people. They want to show how people are coming in to vote. So it's just all good advertisement for us, I believe. And that's that one. Also, for information, both parties, the Democratic and the Republican parties, have sent out flyers. That this just so happens to be the one I got yesterday on my desk, and it's the Republican one. The Democrats also sent one out. And so a lot of people are getting those in the mail, and it is for registration. And both of them have 2 applications. It looks like a lot here, but it's 2 applications that can be filled out and sent in. Some people have been confused with that, thinking it's a ballot, or why did I get this because I didn't request it? It's just being sent out to lots of people, and it's from the state. It's not from us. It's not even from the local parties. So they're great. Fill them out, send them in if you need to register. And with that, I think that's all the updates I have right now.
Well, and I would only follow up with a couple of things. One, just because it was confusing to me. So in case anyone else is confused with October 12th being a Wednesday, the issue is that Columbus Day is celebrated at the state. That is a state holiday. And so that would ordinarily have been the last day to register to vote, but you get an extra day because of the state holiday. It is not a county holiday here in Monroe. And so that is why instead of early voting normally starting on a Tuesday, this year it will start on a Wednesday. It is still 28 days before the election. So I just wanted to clarify that for anybody who may be concerned and show up on a Tuesday. And then also on that mailer, I know one of the things, being a part of legislative committee and being a part of that testimony, I remember that there is supposed to be clear and distinct indication of where it came from. No one should confuse the fact that, or mistakenly think that we sent it. We did not. It should be very clear where that paperwork came from.
Sorry. And both of the ones that we have gotten have been that. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party have followed the instructions, and it is clearly marked, although it still has it brought questions to some people.
Sure.
So,
Sure. And it's supposed to be, I haven't seen the form myself, but it is, the type is supposed to be large enough that you can read it.
for them.
And yeah, there was a particular font that the legislation said that it had to be in.
It is pretty big size on here. It's, to me, very easy to read this one of where it came from.
Mhm.
And it does say it is unsolicited, and is not sent by a state or local elections official. It is from the parties.
And I have no further updates. We are in the swing of receiving legislative proposals from all the clerks. I've had a couple of meetings with senators, and yesterday met with the Indiana Election Division. So as I have information about proposals, I will be happy to bring those before the board.
Thank you. And just to clarify, because I've been getting questions as well, online registration will be open all day on October 11th. Is that correct? Till shortly before midnight?
Yes, you online, you have till 11:59 to file your registration.
And that really is the best way to do it if you can, because if you call in and request an application, we're going to have to send it out. It's going to take 2 days, maybe 3. You're going to have to send it back or walk it back, which you can bring it in. But with online, you do it if you have your Indiana driver's license or Indiana ID, and then we get it the next day. And then the registration is going into motion there. It still will take 7 to 10 days for pending. But if you've done everything right, and if it is really close to that time, I would call in and just say, do you have my registration? Because we'd rather double check to make sure than rather it have gotten lost someplace along the line. But we will still mail people an application, but that's Tuesday that we have to have it back in the office.
Thank you. I don't see further discussion, so we'll move to our next item, which is accessibility for polling sites.
We have guests here today. It might help by way of an introduction to give you a little history behind the topic that we're going to talk about today. Of course, as clerk, I participate in several training conferences every year. And clerks are always cautioned about certain things. And so one of the things that has happened is Indiana Disability Rights reached out to me and asked to meet me at the conference. For whatever reason, we weren't able to meet up. But then they came and supplemented, not replaced, supplemented some very good work that was done by our good friends a couple of years back, where we went out to visit all of our polling sites, gave us feedback on what was working, what could be improved, that type of thing. And we continue to be very grateful for that, and it has made things easier. A couple of things have happened. When the Indiana Disability Rights representative came out, she recommended some language regarding our bathrooms. We had particular language that we were all very comfortable with using, and she disagreed. Mr. Shermis, who is going to speak to us today, learned of that, and he didn't have the background story for why it was even coming up as an issue. So I explained it, and I just want to quickly explain it here. I'll try to be very brief, but it will lead into why he's talking with us today. There's another county in Indiana who changed the location where disabled voters would go in to vote, the entrance, your ingress. Instead of putting a sign up that said that the entrance had changed, the sign said, no handicap voting here. You can imagine how that went over to anybody who saw it. And in the age of camera phones, it did not go over well in that county. So it is still relayed to clerks as a cautionary tale to make sure your signage says what it needs to say. And so we do take care with that. We do not have that issue in Monroe County. I want to be very clear, but there is a little nuance that I'm going to have Mr. Shermis explain, and we can have further discussion after that. Would that be fair?
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you sign in for us,
Yes.
please?
Uh,
Introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Shermis. I am the staff liaison for the Council for Community Accessibility at the City of Bloomington and the Community and Family Resources Department. I work with volunteer surveyors to ensure that facilities in Bloomington are accessible. So we do a lot of different surveys for restaurants and retail stores, but occasionally we get asked by somebody to do other surveys. And we worked with board member Turner here to do all of the polling sites in Bloomington and beyond. We usually don't go outside of Bloomington, but for this, every member thought that this was important enough that we would break the boundaries and go out and do them all. I think there were 32 sites at the time.
There were.
Yeah. And I believe that out of those 32 sites, there might have been 5 that did not have accessible restrooms. And there were other accessibility issues at various sites. And when we had that full list of here are the barriers, the question immediately was raised, what are we going to do to mitigate these barriers? Because it's not like you can just say, yeah, we'll eliminate that polling site because it's not accessible, because we realize that takes it away from certain neighborhoods and areas that need to have a polling site somewhere. So we said, what are we going to do to mitigate those things? And there was back and forth on those mitigations. And when we got them and looked them over and reviewed them, we came back with, oh, we suggest these changes, and we did some negotiation. And of course, one of the ones that was the more challenging one was for the restrooms itself, because that's a bigger deal, not having any restrooms. And so we agreed that if we had a sign that was visible that said there are no accessible restrooms at this polling site, if you need an accommodation, please come see a poll worker at the front of the line. And everybody agreed that that was a good mitigation, including several people from the Council for Community Accessibility, some obviously in wheelchairs, et cetera. And so that was the agreement. This is what we agree that will be the right wording, and everybody walked away from that as in like, we're good with this. We feel this is good communication to people who are in wheelchairs specifically, that they know that they have the opportunity to immediately get up into the front of the line, get their voting done and leave, because sometimes it can be very hard on them waiting in long lines, especially when it comes to restroom issues. And so this was the mitigation we all agreed upon. And so, of course, when it came up that there was the chance of changing this, it didn't sit too well with members of the disability community. And so we came to you all, several of you, as a matter of fact, with what can we do? Can we talk this through? And I feel like after talking it through with everybody that we agreed that these signs could still stand the way they are and that everybody was comfortable with them. So that's my story, sticking with it. And I brought Barbara McKinney, our legal representation from the city, who's also ADA coordinator, as well as Leslie Davis. She is a member of the Council for Community Accessibility, one of our volunteer surveyors as well, too.
Absolutely. And we definitely want to hear from both of them. I just want to be sure, because you and I had an opportunity to meet, and what we discussed was, while well-meaning with the Indiana Disability Rights Group, their recommendation, the verbiage that we agreed on when you did the surveys a couple of years back works for Monroe County. And so that if people from Monroe County are not complaining, that is the recommended and proposed and continued language that we would use for our restrooms.
Exactly.
Is that how we agreed?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was like. We can come to an agreement that this works for our county, that it is not discriminatory, that is just good communication, and that people who are in wheelchairs feel very comfortable with this. So, yeah.
I just wanted to summarize that for the board. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thank
great.
you.
And I can answer questions, but I'm also happy to have any of my
Come on.
colleagues talk. Can I write your name? Is that okay?
Hi,
Hi. Good
nice to
afternoon.
see you all. As Michael said, I'm Leslie Davis. I'm on the Accessibility Committee of the Council for Community Accessibility, and I was one of the people who surveyed polling places.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was eye-opening, and I'm so glad we did it. And I feel like well, of course, we would love for all those churches and other places that are not quite there in terms of accessibility to make changes. We would love more for people with disabilities to be allowed to vote as close as possible to where they live. And the alternative of saying there are no restrooms at all, if there aren't restrooms for everyone, seemed unnecessarily punitive. And it might mean, it might send the signal that that one should not try to vote here. So we are happy with the language that implies if you come to a long line as a wheelchair user or a person with reduced mobility and you get worried that you aren't going to be able to wait long enough, the indication is there that you can head on up to the front of the line and say, hey, I'm that person on that sign, and I'd like to vote now. But nor does it invite, everybody with a disability to just race ahead. It's not like going to Disneyland and asking for a wheelchair so you can get to the front of the line. So we're happy with it, and we hope that we can keep it for Monroe County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I say a word? Our effort 2 years ago to do this was really partially at the urging of Randy Paul, who was an inspiration to all of us. And we continue that effort in his memory.
Well said.
And I'm Barbara McKinney. I'm the Assistant City Attorney with the City of Bloomington. I'm also the ADA Compliance Officer for the city. And obviously, the best solution would be to have accessible restrooms in every polling site. But given the reality of needing the sites for just one day, and you can't find all those available sites, this is a reasonable compromise. And I think probably the most used word in the ADA outside of maybe the and a is reasonable. And sometimes you do the best you can. And this gives full information to people who are online and they can make a decision for themselves. And it just seems like the best solution. And this is, I'm not giving you legal advice. I should make that legal disclaimer probably. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that it has been actually very pleasant working with all of you that I've had conversations with in the last couple of months. And I appreciate all your efforts. And what feels good is I know that your heart is in the right place, that you care about accessibility, that you want people to vote. You don't want to put up barriers. And so I really appreciate all that you all have done to be able to make that possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We continue to be grateful for all you've done.
And any time in the future, if there's anything else that needs any help with accessibility surveys, we stand ready and waiting for that. So please come back. Thanks.
Thank you. And we really appreciate, I thought the history and background was really helpful, as well as we just really appreciate you all coming here and providing comments as well.
And so to sum it up, at the time with the dual recommendations, I was concerned about litigation in Monroe County. We certainly want every single Monroe County voter to know that the polls are available and accessible to the degree that we can do them. As someone said, if there's a church or something that is not completely accessible, we do the best we can to mitigate. And so I entertained the language from the Indiana Disability Rights Organization in an effort to avoid litigation. But after speaking with Mr. Shermas and his colleagues, I definitely am comfortable that the signage that we currently have is the right signage for Monroe County's voters, and that is the signage that we should continue to utilize. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have further discussion?
I do not.
Well, thank you so much. So we'll move to our next item of new business, which is equipment testing.
So we did the LAT testing and everything. So that is taking our equipment, testing it to see. We have ballots that are read. We know what the answers is going to be when we scan these ballots in, that we're going to know how many votes get to which person. And every person on the ballot is marked down, and they all have the combinations of everything are put on there. And then we have the end result comparing what the equipment says to what the pre-programmed answers are, and it matched 100% like it always has. But it's always a good thing. We enjoy seeing that. We want the community to be confident that our equipment does work. And the scanning, all of that is done, of course, by machines. Although our ballots are all paper ballots that you're marking them down. And we are thankful that we don't do a hand count, even though some people might think that's a good thing, but that's, it's very hard to count thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots and have it 100% accurate. But this testing gives confidence to us as well as the community that that's what is happening. And that was advertised also in the paper for the community to come. It's always open to everyone who would like to. And at every election, we do that before everyone. Any more thoughts on that, Ms. Nicole?
I was at a conference when I got the 100% text. Of course,
Nice.
I am always incredibly proud. It is a reminder of the great work that we're doing here in Monroe County with our employees and our vendor, and we just could not do what we do without you all. And so I was very proud to get that text, and I had no doubts that it would be absolutely fine. And thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we'll move to our next item, which is the CAN 39 legal notice of election.
All right, so the legal notice of the general election needs to be put into the Herald Times paper 21 days before the election, or at least 21 days before. And that gives you the information of all the offices to be filled by the voters. And it lists the public questions that are going to be submitted to the voters, the judicial retention questions to be submitted to the voters, and the in-person absentee or our early voting information. So the times, the dates, the hours, and all of that. And that was printed in the Herald Times. And probably don't need that sticky note on there, but it was a full page, basically. So that was done September 27th ahead of time, but on time scheduled, but so you may have seen that in the Herald Times. If not, it was there, and you can go back and search for that for September 27th. But we also have all that information on our website too.
Thank you very much. Any discussion?
No.
We'll move to our next item, which is the new call list, new process, and policy request.
All right, so there, did we discuss this at all one time or not? I can't remember.
It came up,
And then we tabled it or something.
we tabled.
Okay. I have a letter from the Democratic chair, David. Oh, I just forgot his last name.
Henry. Mr. Henry.
Okay. So he is not very happy with the no call list, and I don't disagree with him. So the no call list, both parties have one, and it's for different reasons. It can be because somebody has asked not to be called. So it can be that kind of a no call list. Or if we've had problems with certain people that we just can't get around, and this is for election day or early voting staffing. The problem with this, the process and the policy, it just isn't very conducive. So we don't have a date of like when this person was added. Sometimes we have a reason why they were added. Sometimes we don't. We don't have necessarily birth dates with them. So if we have two Hal Turners, I can't tell you which Hal Turner it is if I don't have his birthday. And so it's gotten to be a little difficult. And David also recommended that we have the same process. Both parties do it exactly the same. And it isn't. The Republicans submit theirs and the Democrats submit theirs. It would be just easier to work with as the recruiters and our office if they were the same. And so he just says, I believe we need a process and policy from the election board to set a standard for how to address volunteers who are accused of behavior at polling sites, which again, it's not only of that. And it should have the minimum of dates, times, details, their contact information and recommendation from the staff. So I really don't know how the board wants to go about that. If they want to talk with the chairs, I have not really talked directly with Taylor, the Republican one, but Chair, I would think that both parties would be very happy to get this organized a little bit better.
What if we invited them to a meeting following the election? Now would not be a good time to discuss their concerns. Because frankly, I would also have concerns. We don't just arbitrarily put people on the do not call list. What I have seen evidence of is if there is an issue, we attempt to work through it with the party chair first. You know, maybe asking them to talk to the person, but if it's something that continues, or if it is something that rises to the level of, you know, you can't threaten election staff. You can't, you know, there's a level of decorum, an expectation level, a work ethic level, a dress code. And so if you continue, if the discussions don't work or the discussions break down, we have to look at another issue. We've had someone who came through and am I recalling this right, Karen? They didn't like how our vendors set up the equipment at a polling site. So they decided to unplug, dismantle, turn off, and reposition. We can't have that.
Right.
We can't have that. And so I'd love for the party chairs to come and talk with us about their concerns, perhaps hear our concerns as well, and then agree on kind of a blanket level. Sorry, Mr. Huff.
Am I recognized?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I would recommend that before that meeting, we draft I hate to call it this, a form, on which we could record the pertinent information of an incident, both for future reference, if there are changes in board or changes in the election staff. And also so that if there is any legal question involved, we have all the details recorded at the time of the incident. And that we could have the Republican and Democrat chairs review this when they come together. And I thought we had a form similar to this already, for something that we approved a couple of years ago.
Definitely remember the discussion, but I don't know that a form actually came to fruition.
Okay.
I feel like it was under when someone else was chair of the election board, and I just don't believe that.
I'm the last one I ever thought would recommend another form, having worked for the government for 10 years. But I think in this case, it's pertinent and proper that we record the details of an incident so that future people don't wander into the same areas that we wandered into.
I personally think that's a great idea, because I think, as you noted, it would make it easier to find people or gather additional information if needed. And I also wanted to say that my understanding is that there's a very clear description given at the trainings of the expected behavior, decorum, and rules, and maybe a form or something like that is a place that it can be reiterated, right? So to remind people of what the standards are. And I think the combination of a clear process, repeating the messages, hopefully will actually make the number of complaints go down, right? Because if, people won't misuse the process, but also will be reminded of the rules multiple times.
I read through the documentation that's given to poll workers in advance of their actual service. And it's very explicit about what prohibited behaviors are. It would be easy for the form to be built off of that.
Yeah, and I like the idea of having a record as well with the
Yeah,
form. So,
it's important. Anytime you're dealing with personnel, you really need to make sure that it's documented.
I think we do a pretty good job of explaining what needs to be done at the pool site. Our trainers in the past and present always, I think, have done a good job. However, sometimes things get passed or we have different kind of personality or there's just been various things. We did have a pretty major issue. Everything was fine in the end, but they weren't doing what was expected. And maybe they got in over their head, that can happen too. But then we can't have them in that position again to protect the integrity of the election. But believe me, we're not looking for that side because we're wanting people to be a part and to be involved, and we want those good workers. But sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Correct.
And we don't want to repeat that again. For us to do it again, we're setting them up to fail. And we certainly have opened our doors for not good things.
right.
So let me ask the question, which is the elephant in the room. Who will draft this form? Would you like one of us to submit a possible draft to the rest of the election board?
I
And
think a draft would be wonderful.
I would volunteer
Would you volunteer?
to do
Yeah.
that.
We're looking for a few good volunteers.
Since I worked in management for years and years and years, longer than most people in this room have been alive.
Oh,
And so I've dealt with these issues before and I understand the election board issues and the election service issues as well. So
Did I give you that letter from David, Chair David? If not, I can give this one to you. It could have been in your packet or not. I'm not for sure.
And perhaps after we have a draft, we could circulate the draft to the party chairs and get
I
their
think
feedback.
I think that would be great. And I'm hopeful that what comes out of this discussion, it's never personal. When it comes to the point of someone being on the no-call list, there are just some behaviors that are beyond reproach when you're trying to put on an election with integrity. And there should be a uniform process. I feel like we've done our best as far as trying to work through the party chairs so that they knew it wasn't personal. And I'm not sure Mr. Henry is altogether lovely. I'm sure, there's a perspective that I'm missing. But I think if we can all come together, I think it would be great. And your draft would be the perfect way to kick off that conversation.
okay, and I will shoot for having that draft done by Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
So I don't see further discussion, and thank you so much again for volunteering. So we'll move now to the public comment portion. So anyone who would like to make a public comment either in person or online. In person, we have the podium here and ask people to sign in and have 3 minutes. And anyone who would like to make a comment who is connecting to us virtually, if you could either use the raise hand function or put a message in the chat letting us know that you would like to make a public comment. So I'll start with in person. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment? Okay, so I don't see anyone here in person. Then who wants to comment? I'm gonna give everyone online a moment. If anyone wants to comment, please raise your hand or type a message in the chat so we can know to recognize you. Okay, and I don't see anyone wanting to make a public comment online either. So we will move to our next item, which is the announcement of our next county election board meeting, which is November 3rd, 2022 at 1 p.m. here in this room, as well as we will have a virtual connection opportunity as well. And I will move next to our last item. Do I have a motion to recess or adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Chairperson Rana,
Yes.
Board Member Turner. Board Member Turner
Yes.
and Clerk Brown.
Yes.
Motion has been approved 3-0.
Thank you. So our meeting is adjourned.